And so he knew he had to get something done.
For hours for, and then I bought some software that I could put the Twitter data in. And it seems like just right now, like just right before we started the show, it looks like all my tweets were successfully erased.
There you go.
Oh, no. Okay.
You're welcome. You guys, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. He's still gone. He's still no longer on Twitter. I drove H3H3 off of Twitter with my cartoon. Thank you so much.
That's
Can I
very
get a
good.
little applause?
Yeah. Wow.
Thank you. Isn't that good? Did you know about that, though? Did you know that?
I did not know that, no. I one time got Tim Heidecker to leave Twitter for a month.
That's not bad. That's pretty good.
It was a month, but he couldn't help himself. He had to come back. I'm shocked Ethan hasn't come back. These guys are so
No, he's not back. I'll make another cartoon of his wife when he comes back.
Do you have one like in the can ready to go just for that?
I
occasion?
actually was making one about her with Teddy Flash, and she's sucking on like little teddy bears. She's drinking like the crotches of teddy bears and stuff like that.
Nice.
But I'm not don't know if I will do that. But should we pull? I don't know if we're past this now, but I was really curious to see what you thought of the John Cristofalusi Simpsons thing. Because were you around when that dropped?
I'll pull that up. I actually wanted to finish a point about that because we never really finished the thought on that, which was we were talking about how the limitations create the greatness there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you feel the same way. I mean, especially when we're talking about like a cartoon you made where a lady is blowing away Palestinian children, or a cartoon where Chinese ladies, chinging and chonging with a bat.
I can tell you the limitation there, though. I can tell you about the
Okay, yeah, I would love to. Is there a limitation there?
The limitation there is, now again, that cartoon was fucking old, but back then, there was some scrutiny being put on Etha Klein for whether or not she had seen action or not.
Right.
And when that was popping or trending or whatever you want to call it, then it's incumbent upon the artist to hone in on that immediately, right? So the limitation is to get it out as quickly as possible. So that cartoon, I made that in one sitting. I sat down for 16 hours.
Okay.
Animated the whole thing and then released. That's the limitation.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's different though, because like you're fighting the clock. You're not fighting a higher power.
I'm not. Yeah. But I think because we're talking about limitation in general, because even when we're talking about the nostalgia factor of aesthetics that people emulate, that's also a limitation. They're emulating specifically the limitation of a medium too. But anyways, maybe we're getting too artsy fartsy now.
Well, I don't give a shit. Fuck them. The example I always use when I'm just talking about this in general, not in specific with John K or anything. When I talk about this topic, I use Ren and Stimpy as an example because I think the best example ever is they weren't allowed to say booger on Ren and Stimpy, which is kind of hard to believe. When you go back and watch Ren, I mean, there's like a naked old man running around with a chicken bone on his head and stuff like there's insane, gross shit going on.
Yeah, and they weren't allowed to show his naked butt crack, so he has a band-aid, which makes it more bizarre.
And the one that...
It's rule. It makes it more... the limitation makes it more awesome.
It's so much funnier, and the perfect example of that is they weren't allowed to say booger, so they said, well, fuck it. We're going to come up with the dumbest fucking thing we could ever... You won't let us say booger to kids? Kids are who says booger, by the way. It's not actually called boogers. It's mucus or phlegm. And so they said, we're going to call it magic nose goblins. And,
that makes it more terrible.
It's way worse. It's like 1,000 times. And then that made them alive, and it became like this running gag on the show. And then they did the gross up painting of it where they're like, they're intricately detailed. There's the one with the blood on it and like a
There's
vein.
another example of that in the show where they basically went through the list they got from Nickelodeon of banned words and things. They weren't allowed to show nipples, right?
Okay.
So they said, are we allowed to do rubber? Can we use the word nipple when it's a rubber nipple? right?
Rubber
and then
nipple
they said, well,
salesman.
yes, you can do that. So they made a whole episode about rubber nipple salesman.
which has one of the most horrifying scenes in Ren and Stimpy in it.
Call the police.
Yeah, they bring out it was a walrus. They've got this walrus, and the walrus is asking them to call the police. He's terrified.
Somebody needs to make an edit of this episode and then cut in, paste in all those little clips of that show.
Yeah, Clippers get on it. You got to do a lot of Ren and Stimpy research where you're not a geek about this and don't know it. But I think
they literally were so defiant against the censors that they said, okay, so this is not allowed. We're allowed to do this. And then they made a whole fucking episode about it. You know
and I've seen people say the same thing about, I've never listened to Howard Stern, but the one thing that I heard over and over again about Howard, I was not that long ago doing some research into Howard Stern for an episode of the show. I don't know why. And the thing I saw fans, like former fans of the show, say over and over again is he was so much better when he had somebody to fight against. When he went to satellite radio, he had nothing to fight against. And I think about that. I've been thinking about that for years, where it's like when I go into the pizza fund and I can do anything I want, it's not really as good of a show, which is not a good, I'm not advertising myself very well here by saying that. But when you're on, the reason I like going back to YouTube when I get kicked off of YouTube is I don't want to be on the place that will let me do anything. Letting me do anything, like every time I get kicked off of YouTube, it's for like brand new rules that you never could have seen coming. There's actually a bit of a sport to it. It's actually kind of fun where you're like, I could have never predicted this. This is unreal.
You're riding the line, content. That's what they call edgy. That's why I don't mind when people call me edgy because that's what it means. You're riding the line.
Anytime somebody uses the word edgy, I just think in my head like, oh, so you think this is edgy? That's cool. Like you're like scared of this basically when you say that.
By the way, I was reminded of another '90s cartoon that talks about fighting against that edge, right? Which is one of the inspirations for Butch Gilligan as well. It's the Bruce Timm Batman the Animated Series cartoons, which I bet you've watched as well.
Of course, yeah.
Have you ever seen the behind-the-scenes thing when they talk about that the Joker, who is a homicidal maniac, and he wasn't allowed to kill anybody,
right?
Which was a problem for them,
right? Because he needs to be evil.
Yeah, he needs to be evil. So what did they do? They came up with a thing where the Joker toxin makes people. They put them in a catatonic state where they have this huge grin on their face, and they're just like this, giggling.
Right.
Which is much worse faith than death, you know?
Horrifying.
It made it so much more creepy, basically, you know what I'm saying? It added this super extra creepy thing that they would have never even have thought to figure out if they hadn't gotten that limitation of him just outright shooting a guy, which also would have been cool.
It's one of the problems of the internet, at least for the type of stuff that I do, maybe not for you, but one of the problems of the internet is...
Oh, you think you're more edgy than me?
No, well, God,
Let's
no.
have an edge off.